I've never stopped thinking about that Tuesday a few months ago. I was teaching at my middle school like I always do. The kids were outside during recess. I was staying late, as usual, tired from grading papers. Then the fire alarm went off. It was loud and jarring. I felt my heart race as I gathered my students quickly, but instead of heading outside, I noticed something odd. The other teachers were clustered together, whispering. They looked scared. I moved closer to them, trying to get a sense of what was happening. They were pointing toward a dark section of the hallway. My gut tightened. The tension felt thick in the air. The lights above us flickered, and my skin prickled. I felt a deep chill settle over the room. After years of drills, this felt different. We had practiced lockdowns time and time again, but now it felt real. I wanted to tell the kids everything was okay, but I wasn't so sure. During one of our routine drills a few weeks after that, I heard it again. Whispers. They were soft but urgent, echoing from somewhere down the hall. I froze. The students glanced at me, their eyes wide with fear. I didn't know what to say. It could have been my imagination, right? But the air felt heavy, like something was watching us. As days turned into weeks, odd things happened more regularly. I spotted shadows darting past the windows and saw strange figures on the surveillance feeds. My heart raced each time I looked. The kids would ask me what was happening, but I didn't have answers. I just felt helpless. Then, everything changed one afternoon. The lights went out. It was sudden and total darkness. Panic spread across the room. I felt my pulse quicken as I scanned the frightened faces of my students. I tried to stay calm, moving closer to them, speaking softly that it would be okay. But then I heard a whisper, clear and sharp, "Get out." The word sent fear coursing through me. Were those words meant for me? I turned around to look down the hall. That's when I saw him. A figure slouched against the wall at the end of the corridor. I squinted, gripping the doorframe for support. "Are you okay?" I asked, taking a cautious step forward. But he vanished. I blinked, trying to make sense of what just happened. Was it real, or just my mind playing tricks? I slammed the door, my hands shaking. I wanted to reassure my students. Instead, I felt terror settle in my bones. Something was hidden in those halls, something we couldn't see. It was as if the school itself had become alive, and it was watching us. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I saw was not just a trick of the light. The figure had been there, I was sure of it. But I couldn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe me? Would they think I was losing my mind? I carried the weight of that sighting with me, and even now, I'm left wondering what it really was or if I had imagined it at all. I spent the next few days in a haze. Teaching felt different. The voices of my students, usually so vibrant, turned muffled under the weight of my thoughts. I couldn't shake the image of that figure standing in the hall. I needed answers, but each time I tried to probe deeper, I hesitated. Would it make me look foolish? As we moved into the weekend, I found myself losing sleep. Shadows in my home crawled across the walls, and noises echoed from the corners. Yet, despite my fear, I decided to head back to the school that Saturday. Maybe I could confront the empty halls and find some sort of closure. The school felt colder than I remembered. I parked in the back lot. The trees swayed in the wind, their rustling leaves creating an eerie symphony. My breath fogged in the cold as I made my way to the entrance. The sun had barely risen, and the first light barely penetrated the gloom that I pushed through the double doors, the creak of the hinges echoing throughout the empty building. A series of faint noises caught my attention. I paused, straining to hear. Was that a laugh? I tiptoed toward the source, my heart racing with every cautious step. As I approached the cafeteria, I saw it a flickering light. I held my breath and pressed closer to the door. Was there someone inside? Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. The cafeteria lay empty, chairs pushed aside as if a storm had passed through. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was a cluster of words written on the chalkboard by the serving line. They read, "Help US." My skin prickled. Panic clawed at my chest. I glanced around, searching for any sign of life, but nothing moved. My mind spun with questions. Who had written this? What did they need help from? Then the cold air seemed to shift, and my instinct screamed at me to leave. I turned to exit, but something froze me in place. A shadow darted through the doorway I had just passed. No, I thought. It couldn't be. Hello. I called out, my voice trembling. Silence answered back. My feet felt heavy, but I couldn't help myself. I stepped back toward the darkness of the hallway. The light flickered off, plunging me into an unsettling dark. Suddenly, I heard it again, a whisper, sharper this time, "Get out." The words reverberated through me like a warning bell. I bolted for the exit, my heart racing faster than I thought possible. I burst through the doors and didn't stop running until I was safely back in my car. I gripped the steering wheel, the message on the chalkboard burned in my mind. I found out what they wanted, but it didn't make sense. I was trapped between fear and curiosity. Who had left that message? And what danger still lurked within the school? I resolved to dig deeper. I couldn't ignore the urgency. Whatever I discovered next would either clarify what was happening or plunge me deeper into the darkness. The school had secrets, and I was determined to uncover them even if it put me at risk. The next day, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. I couldn't shake off the feeling that whatever happened at the school wasn't just a flicker of my imagination. I had to find those who needed help. I needed a plan, that I decided to speak with my colleague, Sarah, who had been at the school longer than I had. Maybe she could shed some light on this. As I walked into the staff room, I found her sipping coffee, a tired look on her face. She was always the first one there, eager to prepare for the school day ahead. "Hey, Sarah. Can I ask you something?" I ventured, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sure. What's up?" she replied, her eyebrows raised. That I hesitated, weighing my words. "Have you noticed anything strange around here? You know, unusual noises, or maybe even something on the chalkboards?" A shadow crossed her face. "Why do you ask? Did something happen?" Before I could answer, the bell rang, pulling her away. I felt the urgency to share what I had learned creeping back. But there was no time. Classes were starting, and I would have to wait. That afternoon, I found an opening. As the students shuffled out for dismissal, I pulled Sarah aside. I saw something in the cafeteria, a message on the chalkboard. It said, "Help US." Her expression shifted. "That sounds like what happened last year," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Haven't you heard the rumors? Kids used to talk about strange things happening at night. A few even claimed they saw a figure roaming the halls." "What? Why didn't anyone mention this before?" My frustration bubbled up. "I thought they were just urban legends, you know. But there were incidents, unexplained events that made some teachers uneasy. One night, during a lockdown, a teacher said she saw something in the hallway. She quit soon after." A chill crawled down my spine. This isn't just some legend. I felt a knot forming in my stomach. "We need to do something about it." "I don't know what you're suggesting," Sarah replied, her eyes darting around. "This might be better left alone." I gritted my teeth. Every instinct told me that staying silent would only lead to more confusion. I needed more information. That night, I began to research. I went online, scouring forums and local news articles. I found mentions of lockdown incidents that occurred over the years. Most were swept aside, forgotten, but one caught my attention, a series of strange occurrences that coincided with the closing of a beloved program for troubled students. They had once occupied the basement, a place now locked and shrouded in mystery. My heart raced. Could there be a connection? Then my eyes landed on a photograph included with an article: 3 students who had been part of that program, their faces pale and expressionless. But one stood out. That S when I saw it, the same figure I'd spotted in the hall, that I couldn't ignore it any longer. I had to find out what had happened in that basement. Whatever secrets lay hidden there, I needed to confront them head-on, but something about the idea set my nerves on fire. I wasn't just walking into the unknown, I was walking into danger. With that thought lingering, I made my decision: tomorrow, I'd find a way to get into the basement. And I wouldn't go alone. The next morning, anxiety twisted in my stomach. I arrived at school early, heart pounding. The quiet hallways seemed even emptier than usual. I was supposed to meet Sarah before classes began. I needed backup for this mission. As I walked towards the staff room, I spotted her sitting at a table, her eyes focused intently on her phone. I took a deep breath and approached. "Hey, Sarah. Are you ready?" She looked up, concern written all over her face. "I'm not sure about this. I mean, the basement. Are we really going in there?" I felt a wave of determination wash over me. "Yes, we need to. You said strange things happened. Someone has to figure it out." "Okay, but we need to be careful," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "If something is wrong, it could be serious." "I get it," I replied. "Let us stick together and just check it out." In that moment, I felt an odd mix of fear and resolve. We made our way to the basement. Sarah hesitated as we reached the door, which towered above us like a giant's gate. It was locked, just as I had suspected. "Now what?" she asked, glancing around as if something might jump out at us. I pulled out the key I had found when searching my desk. It had been buried under a pile of papers, forgotten until now. I didn't even know why I hadn't thrown it out. "This might be our only chance," I said, shaking it in front of her. "Are you serious?" she stammered, her eyes wide. "It's worth a shot." I inserted the key and turned it slowly, cringing at the sound of the lock clicking open. The door creaked ominously, revealing stairs that descended into darkness. "I'm not sure about this," Sarah whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Neither am I admitted. But we owe it to the kids and to ourselves." We stepped inside, and the chill hit me like a wall. The air was thick, almost stifling, and we both hesitated at the top of the staircase before descending into shadows. The stairs felt shaky under our feet, our flashlights flickered, illuminating bits of dust and cobwebs that seemed to cling desperately to the walls like memories too long left unattended. The basement opened into a large space, agonizingly dark and quiet. I could feel a weight pressing down on me, chilling my bones. I panned the light around, revealing dark-colored lockers lining the walls, some dented and rusted. "Wow," Sarah breathed next to me. "This place feels abandoned." "Maybe it is," I mused, scanning the room. But in the corner, something caught my eye: a small table covered with papers and drawings, some crumpled and torn. My heart raced. I walked closer. That S when I saw it. A hastily scribbled note lying flat on the table. I reached down, my fingers trembling as I picked it up. It read, "They can't keep us trapped. Find us before it's too late." As I turned to share it with Sarah, I froze. The air shifted, and I heard a low rumble behind me. The dim light flickered again, and shadows began to warp around the edges of my vision. "Sarah?" I called, but there was no response. Suddenly, the locker doors began to rattle, and a cold whisper drifted through the room. "Help us!" Panic coursed through me. Someone or something was in here with us. I felt reality blur as fear clawed at my mind. I needed to get out. Fast. I turned back toward the door, my heart racing. "Sarah?" I shouted, desperate for her voice to confirm she was still there. But silence responded, thick and stifling. My flashlight wavered, the beam of light flickering as if sensing my fear. The rattling lockers grew louder, echoing throughout the room like a desperate call for help. I could no longer stand still. I took a shaky step back toward the entrance, wishing fervently that I had never come here. That note weighed heavily in my hand, its message gnawing at me even amidst the chaos. Then, I felt a sudden rush of cold air that swept past me. I turned my head slowly, scanning the space. "Sarah, where are you?" My voice cracked, fear creeping into every syllable, and that S when I saw her. She emerged from the shadows across the room, her face pale and her eyes wide, as if she'd seen a ghost. I felt relief flood through me until I noticed the unnatural stillness about her. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice a whisper. She was standing still, fixated on something behind me. I can't. Her words tapered off into a breathless gasp as she pointed. I quickly turned around, fear hammering in my chest. The locker doors were swinging open and closed on their own, and the whispers intensified. "Help us!" it returned with a louder melding of voices, flooding my ears. "Get back!" I shouted, instinctively stepping in front of Sarah. My flashlight bounced wildly, catching sight of shadows pressing against the walls as if trying to escape. Suddenly, something crashed to the floor, a heavy object thrown from one of the lockers. It clattered and echoed, rattling our nerves. My instincts screamed to run, but fear held me in place. "Do you think it's the kids?" Sarah whimpered, grasping my arm tightly. "What if they're trapped down here?" "I don't know," I admitted, voice shaking. The note in my hand felt like a clue, but my mind was too clouded with fear to unravel it. "But we can't stay. We need to leave." Without waiting for a response, I turned and sprinted for the staircase. The whispers morphed into frantic cries, swirling around us. I could hear them clearer now, a chorus of desperate calls. "Help us! Find us!" As I reached the top of the stairs, I turned to grab Sarah's hand, but she hesitated. "What if we can help them?" Her voice was shaky, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. "Or we could die trying," I yelled back, feeling panic surge. "They're not our responsibility. We didn't even know they were down here." Just then, one of the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. The whispers ceased, replaced only by our heavy breathing. The silence felt like a predator, stalking us. In that moment, I made a choice. I grabbed Sarah's wrist. "We're leaving now, and we don't look back." I felt her resistance fade as fear took over. We ran, the darkness closing in on us like a wall. The only sound was the pounding of our footsteps against the stairs, mingling with the echoes of whispers that lingered behind us. Just as we reached the door, I felt a hand brush against my shoulder, cold and claw-like. I turned, terror gripping my heart. No one was there. The door slammed shut behind us, sealing away whatever was in that basement. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air. But a part of me knew that whatever we had uncovered was only the beginning. We hadn't solved anything, we had only scratched the surface. And as I looked back at the darkened door, I felt a chilling certainty we were far from alone. Chapter 2. I leaned against the cold, brick wall, trying to catch my breath. My heart was still racing, pumping adrenaline through my veins. Sarah stood next to me, trembling. I could see her eyes darting around, still haunted by our recent ordeal. "Did you really feel a hand?" she asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated. My mind replayed the moment. It was too real, too cold. "I think so. I mean, I don't know." I ran a hand through my hair, trying to calm myself. "I just want to get out of here." We stumbled into the hallway, light flooding over us like a lifeline. The stark contrast to the darkness below was a relief, but the anxiety still churned in my stomach. I looked over at Sarah. "We need to talk to someone. Someone who can help us." "Like who?" she replied, her voice quivering. the principal. There's probably a reason no one has told us about that basement. Maybe they don't know. Maybe my voice trailed off as a new thought emerged. Maybe they want to keep it quiet. We made our way to the main office, but the air felt thick as we approached. The somber vibe seemed to seep through the walls, and it unnerved me. I hesitated at the door, glancing back down the dim corridor we had just fled. Just then, I caught a glimpse of something moving at the end of the hallway. A shadow darted out of sight. My breath quickened. "Did you see that?" I asked Sarah, nudging her shoulder. She followed my gaze, eyes wide. I didn't see anything. Maybe it was just my voice trailed off again. I didn't want to say it, but the options in my mind led to a singular conclusion: we weren't alone. "Let's just get inside," I said, pushing open the office door. The secretary looked up, her expression blank but stern. "Can I help you?" she asked, barely glancing at us. We just came from the basement," I began, but her eyes narrowed. "There's nothing down there. No students, no events, nothing. It's off limits. Just stay out of trouble, okay?" I felt my stomach flip. "But we heard voices. We saw things." My voice rose, desperation fueling my words. The secretary shook her head. "Kids love to joke around. Now, if you have no business here, please leave." I stepped back, stunned. What was she hiding? I could see Sarah glancing nervously at the office door behind me. "We need to go," she murmured, sounding almost defeated. As we began to leave, a loud crash echoed through the hall. I turned back instinctively, heart racing. The secretary's face turned pale. "What was that?" she asked, now looking genuinely frightened. "Didn't you hear the noise? It came from the direction of the door we had just exited." I grabbed Sarah, pulling her back toward the office. Another crash reverberated, causing us both to jump. "We have to check it out," I said, rubbing my sweaty palms against my jeans. "No. We should stay," Sarah protested, gripping my arm tight. But before I could respond, the lights flickered again. Then they died, plunging us into darkness. My stomach dropped. I could feel Sarah's breath against my shoulder as her panic rose. "Stay close," I whispered, feeling my way back toward the door. Suddenly, I remembered the note. Its strange message rushed back to me, echoing through my mind, layering itself over the darkness. That's when I saw it. A dim light glimmered in the distance, barely illuminating the corridor ahead. A figure stood just at the edge, obscured and yet somehow familiar. "Who is there?" I called out, fear tightening my throat. The shadow shifted, and then nothing. It melted back into the darkness like it never existed at all, leaving us in silence once more. I felt icy dread settle in the pit of my stomach. Whatever was happening in this school was far worse than I had imagined. There was something lurking, and now it seemed to be watching us. "Let us go," I said, driving urgency into my words. We needed to find out what was happening, and we needed to do it fast. Chapter 3. We crept through the darkness, hearts racing, each step echoing in the silence. Sarah clutched my arm tightly, as if anchoring herself against the unknown that loomed around us. I was torn between curiosity and dread. The need to uncover the truth tugged at me, but so did the instinct to run. "Where do we go now?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know," I admitted, glancing around. The faint glimmer of light had vanished, leaving us with nothing but shadows. "But we can't just stand here." We moved further down the hallway, the ominous atmosphere pressing down on us. The air was heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding secrets. What had the secretary meant by nothing down there? It felt like more than a simple warning. Then, I spotted it, a narrow door on our left, slightly ajar. A flickering light seeped through the gap, and without thinking, I reached for the handle. "Should we check this out?" I asked. Sarah hesitated, biting her lip. What if it's just another empty room? Or what if it's the answers we're looking for? My determination overruled my fear, and I pushed the door open. Inside, the room was cluttered with old school supplies and dusty textbooks. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, casting dancing shadows across the walls. I stepped inside, squinting in the dim light. In the far corner, I spotted something unusual, a large, weathered trunk. The kind that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. "Look at that," I said, pointing. Sarah took a cautious step forward. "What do you think is inside?" I knelt, brushing away a layer of dust. "Only one way to find out." I lifted the latch and opened the trunk slowly. Inside, a collection of faded photographs lay haphazardly, mostly of students and events from years long past. They looked innocent enough, but one picture caught my attention. That it showed a group of students huddled together, but one face stood out among them. A girl with the same dark hair and mischievous smile as the figure I had seen before. I turned to Sarah, excitement bubbling up in my chest. "Do you see her? That girl looks just like the shadow." "What?" Sarah leaned closer, her eyes widening. "It can't be." My heart raced for a different reason now. What if she is connected to whatever is going on here? Just then, we heard a noise, a soft whisper. It felt like the walls were alive, breathing secrets into our ears. "Did you hear that?" Sarah's voice trembled. Before I could respond, the trunk slammed shut, making us jump back. The lights flickered again, then plunged us into darkness once more. Panic settled in like ice. What was that?" I stammered, struggling to regain my composure. "I don't know, but we should leave." Sarah grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. As we stumbled into the hallway, I felt it again, a cold draft that sent shivers down my spine. There was something here, something that wanted us to find it. "Wait," I said, halting in my tracks. Along the wall, faint writing began to appear like smoke. "The past never forgets." "What does that mean?" Sarah whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "I'm not sure," I replied, but I could feel the heaviness of those words settling deep in my gut. "But I think we're about to find out." Before I knew it, a loud thud resonated from the other end of the hallway, causing us both to freeze. Something had shifted. And it was headed our way. "Run!" I shouted, as fear took over, propelling us back into the darkness we had just emerged from. Chapter 4. We burst back into the darkened hallway, adrenaline surging through my veins. I could hear Sarah's breath quickening beside me, matching my own as we sprinted away from the ominous sound. My heart pounded loud enough that I thought it would drown out everything else around us. "Where do we go?" she gasped between breaths. I glanced over my shoulder, the darkness swallowing the space behind us. "Just keep running," I yelled back, pushing ahead. I needed to find an exit. The way we came felt like a trap now. We veered sharply to the right, praying the area would wrap around to a stairwell or another exit. The flickering lights overhead did nothing to ease the creeping dread coiling in my stomach. I grabbed Sarah's hand, pulling her along, not daring to look back. But the thud had echoed again, closer this time. "Do you think it's what we saw?" Sarah panted. "I don't know," I shouted, the fear tainting my voice. Every corner we turned felt like a gamble. The darker it got, the more alive the shadows seemed. We spotted a door at the end of the hallway, its surface worn and chipped. I ran toward it, slamming my shoulder against the wood. It swung open, revealing a dark stairwell spiraling downward. "This way," I said. Sarah hesitated. "What if it leads to something worse? Do you want to wait here?" I snapped, glancing back as another thud reverberated through the building. There was no time for indecision. I pulled her inside, and we descended the creaking steps, the scent of mildew filling the air. With each step we took, a sense of urgency gripped me. I could feel it, something was following us, its presence heavy and palpable. The whispers began again, faint, but unmistakable. This time, they carried a tone of warning. "Turn back," they seemed to say. "You should not be here." When we reached the bottom, I spotted a faint light at the end of the hall. It drew me like a moth to a flame. We hurried down, each step echoing through the damp corridor. When we reached the light, it burst into the room like a beacon, revealing an unexpected sight. Old desks lay scattered about, and in the center of the mess was a large chalkboard. Written on the board in shaky handwriting were names, lots of them. The letters twisted together, and I felt a sudden thrill. "These must be the students from the photos," I exclaimed. I stepped closer, scanning the names for anything familiar. "Wait," Sarah whispered urgently, gripping my arm. "Look at the last name." I squinted. "Do you see it?" she prompted, point trembling that my heart stopped. Tucked away at the bottom, tucked in the corner, was a name I recognized from the photographs. It matched the girl's one of the names linked to her image. A chill raced down my spine. What did she have to do with all of this? Before Sarah could respond, the room darkened momentarily, and a sudden crash erupted from behind us. Fragments of wood splintered off a nearby desk as if an invisible force had hurled itself against it. "Something's here," I shouted, surging back toward the door, but then everything went dark, and then I felt a cold rush of air, as if someone had just stepped into the space behind me. There was no time for thoughts. Only instinct. "Run!" I screamed, but the words barely left my lips before something latched onto my shoulder. Chapter 5. I felt the grip tighten, an icy claw sinking into my flesh. Panic surged, and I spun around, but I couldn't see anything in the thick darkness. It was suffocating, like being swallowed whole by a shadow. "Get it off me!" I yelled, swatting at the air. But something held firm. "Let go!" Sarah shouted, and I could hear the distress in her voice. She yanked at my arm, dragging me away from whatever had seized me. In a desperate effort, I tore at the invisible force, and after what felt like an eternity, I was free. We dashed toward the door, but it swung shut with an ominous creak, as if it had a mind of its own. I slammed my palm against the surface, but it would not budge. Just then, the room flickered with a sickly light, revealing the chaos around us. The desks were strewn about, papers fluttering as though a gale had blown through. And then, I noticed a figure at the edge of the light, cloaked in darkness. My breath caught in my throat. Was I seeing things? "Who is there?" I called, voice trembling. No reply came, just the echo of my words bouncing back at us. "Maybe it's a trick of the light," Sarah said, her voice almost a whisper. But deep down, I sensed that it was more. Suddenly, the figure moved, gliding silently across the room toward us. The shadows seemed to cling to it like a second skin. I panicked and searched for another way out. "Over here!" I yelled, pointing toward a small side door barely visible through the dim light. We rushed over, and with shaking hands, I pulled the handle. It was locked. Another crash echoed behind us, this time closer. "Hurry!" I urged, adrenaline pounding in my ears. "I can try to kick it," Sarah suggested, positioning herself. "No time." My heart raced as I dropped to my knees, fumbling with the lock. I could hear the whispers again, louder now. "Leave, get out there!" Urgency rattled me. Just as I felt the lock give way, the door flew open. I fell forward, tumbling into the next room. Sarah followed, and we scrambled to our feet, pushing through a narrow corridor lined with lockers. The air felt charged, heavy as if a storm was brewing. That we glanced back, but nothing had followed us. The room behind us was shrouded in darkness. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe. "What was that?" I gasped, trying to keep my voice low. "I don't know," Sarah said, her brow furrowed in worry. "But I think we're not alone. We have to figure out what is happening here." As we darted toward a set of double doors at the end of the corridor, something shimmered on the ground in front of us, a glint of metal. I knelt, picking up a small locket, its surface cool against my palm. Is this? I trailed off, recognizing the design. It belonged to the girl in the photographs. A chill again crept over me, then, without warning, a deafening bang shook the building, reverberating through the walls. The lights flickered wildly before plunging us back into darkness. "That can't be good," Sarah whispered, fear etched on her face. I clutched the locket tightly, feeling a strange connection to it. Whatever was happening, we had to get to the bottom of it. That I took a deep breath. Let us find out what is going on before it's too late. With that, we stepped into the unknown, a sense of dread tightening around us. Something dark awaited, and I was sure this was just the beginning. I still can't shake that day from my memory. It's been months since Sarah and I stumbled back out of that basement, but the remnants of our encounter linger like a distant echo. Once we reached the main lobby after escaping, we collapsed in a heap, shaking and panting, the weight of what we had experienced thrumming in our veins that we tried to explain to the principal, to anyone who would listen, about the voices, the dark figure, the frantic whispers of children caught in a loop of despair. But our words fell flat. Unsurprisingly, they treated us like we were victims of an overactive imagination, spinning tales of terror in a building meant to nurture young minds. I caught a glimpse of the disbelief in their eyes. The school's unwavering facade of normalcy cloaked whatever truth lingered beneath. In the following days, there was a palpable tension in the air. It wasn't just the haunting memories we carried, but the feeling of being watched. Students whispered, casting wary glances at the empty hallways, while the old lockers sat like sentinels, holding secrets and perhaps a piece of the past that refused to be forgotten. Sarah and I even met to try and make sense of it all. What if others have seen her? I mused. What if they felt it too? We buried ourselves in stories, old newspapers recounting strange events, kids going missing during unmonitored hours, sightings of an unusual figure, incidents that authorities brushed off as urban legends. There was a dark rhythm to it all, a sense of dread that rippled through the history of the school, yet, when we returned to the basement, braving with the remnants of our courage, we found nothing had changed. The dusty air felt like a bruise, heavy and uncomfortable. The locker doors were closed and silent, as if daring us to uncover whatever truths they held. I can still picture the chalkboard where the whispers had pleaded, "Help us." The refrain echoed in my mind like a haunting melody, a ghostly reminder of a reality I could not dismiss. As winter approached, more odd things began occurring, strange noises reverberating through the air, flickering lights, whispers that cut through the stillness. Sometimes when I walked home from school, I could be sworn that I sensed eyes on me, as if those trapped souls were trying to reach out, to warn me. I asked around and found that a few students murmured about similar experiences, but when I pressed for details, they retreated into nervous silence, unwilling to discuss frightening whispers or shadowy figures. Sarah, too, would often remind me that perhaps we had uncovered truths better left untouched. And yet, I felt an aching curiosity lodged in my chest. What were we supposed to do? I would ask her. What if they really are stuck there? But she merely shook her head, indicating perhaps it was better to move on, to leave the school behind. One afternoon, on a whim, I decided to delve deeper. I returned to my classroom, alone. Looking out across the desks, I realized how much had changed since I began teaching there. I turned to the darkened hallway, where shadows danced just beyond the edge of sight. "What else are you hiding?" I whispered into the silence, only to be met with an unsettling quiet. Before long, the feeling returned, a chill sweeping through the corridor, making the hairs on my arms stand on end. I suddenly felt utterly vulnerable, exposed in the absence of another's presence. Just then, a faint whisper echoed through the hallway. My heart leapt. Different from the others I'd heard before, this voice was melodic, almost serene, as it teased at the edges of understanding. "Help us," it sighed, wrapping around my heart like a fog. Eyes wide, I turned and walked back toward the cafeteria, knowing I'd have to confront the whispers once again, knowing I'd have to seek answers even if it meant walking into darkness again. As I crossed the threshold into the cafeteria, I felt the uncanny pull of the chalkboard's message still lingering in the air. I also felt the weight in the locket hanging around my neck, a connection to the girl from the photographs. Was it merely a childhood fear, or a tether to something deeper? Somehow, I knew reaching for those answers might just swing the door to those unanswered questions wide open, and with that, I took a deep breath and stepped forward toward the mystery that still loomed over the school, ready to engage with the haunting past, wherever it might lead me.